Let me ask you kind of the big elephant in the room then is the spoiler question. And I'm sure you've heard this before. So if the goal is ultimately to get rid of the big government liberal side of the House, it sounds to me, however, though, that you're kind of feeling like both parties are giving you the same thing with a different flavor of cake, right? But if you know you're going to take away votes more likely from the Republican side, are we not handing the election to the Obama House?
Well, that has never, Kevin, that has never been my contention. My contention has been that I'm going to take equally from both sides, that we're going to take equally from both sides, and that we're going to take from a group that would not ordinarily vote independents. Mm-hmm. Now, where this question has actually been polled, which has been in New Mexico, I take more votes away from Obama than Romney. And where this has been polled in North Carolina, we take more votes away from Romney than Obama. And and these are very, very slim margins, by the way. Colorado, we take more votes away from Romney. Well, I think what it bears out statistically is that there is, this is not going to be taking from one or the other. It's going to be taking equally from both. Look, I think we just kick ass when it comes to Obama and dollars and cents. When it comes to civil liberties, I think we do a lot better than Obama on civil liberties. When it comes to Romney and civil liberties, I think we kick ass. When it comes to Romney and dollars and cents, I think we do a lot better job. So it's kind of like the best of both parties. That's the Libertarian. That, I think, is also the mindset of most people in this country. The fact that most people in this country describe themselves as being fiscally conservative and socially accepting and tolerant. I fall in that category. I think the majority of citizens in this country are in that same category. I think it's an exciting notion that a libertarian president would challenge Democrats on civil liberties. Look, abolish, repeal the Patriot Act. I would have never signed the National Defense Authorization Act. Let's bring about marriage equality. This would be a libertarian president challenging Democrats. Let's get out of Afghanistan tomorrow. Let's bring an end to the drug war. On the Republican side, how about a libertarian president challenging Republicans to genuinely get the checkbook and balance it? I, Gary Johnson, Libertarian President of the United States, am vetoing this expenditure bill by Republicans because this bill spends too much, doesn't balance the budget. That's an exciting notion to me.
And you have a history to show that. Why don't you give me a little bit of background on your New Mexico history? I mean, most vetoed bills in the history, in fact, what, more than all the combined governors at the time?
Well, it may be an embellishment, Kevin, but I'm waiting for somebody to prove me wrong. I may have vetoed more legislation than the other 49 governors in the country combined. 750 bills, only 2 were overturned. The state's 2-to-1 Democrat. I should have gotten ridden out on a rail for vetoing all that legislation and the accompanying spending that went along with that and the erosion of civil liberties that would have gone along with that. But I didn't. I get reelected by a bigger margin the second time than the first time. So I have no aversion to vetoing legislation. And by the way, a couple of promises. I'm promising to submit a balanced budget to Congress in the year 2013, and I'm promising to veto any legislation where expenses exceed revenue. Even though they end up overriding that veto, I'm going to argue that under that scenario, spending would be lower than any other possible scenario you could come up with. And balancing the federal budget, in my opinion, saves the sinking ship. And we're all going down together unless we, in fact, do balance the federal budget.
Welcome to Facets Television. I'm Kevin McDonald, and tonight we have a very special program. With me tonight is retired Superior Court Judge Jim Gray and Libertarian Vice Presidential candidate, and also in studio via Skype is retired, or excuse me, former New Mexico Governor Gary Johnson and Libertarian presidential candidate. And we really want to thank you, gentlemen, for coming in this evening. Governor, how's it going over there in Santa Fe?
Well, everything is going really well. I think politics are two things. One is having momentum. The other is exceeding expectation. And I really feel like we are voices for the largest growing segment of American politics today, which would be libertarian. You know what? Republicans don't shy away from Republican/libertarian. Democrats don't shy away from Democrat/libertarian. I think the judge and I are making are trying to point out that, you know what? I think there are a lot more of us that are libertarian that understand that. And like I say, I think we are a voice for the largest growing segment of American politics today. And that would be a segment of politics that really is going to point out all the solutions that do go along with the problems that we have.
Well, you know, being today was a pretty historic day, I can't avoid starting with the ruling out of the Supreme Court and what I would consider to be a shocker from Judge Roberts. I'd really like to hear, one, what do you think of his decision? And two, there's two things. One, the upholding of the individual mandate, and two, what do you believe the impact of the Medicaid ruling is going to have on us all?
Well, the Medicaid ruling may be a good thing that states, and I would love to get the judge's take on this, but that states don't have to comply from a Medicaid standpoint, which really would add to the burden that all the states have, and that the biggest financial burden that all the states have is Medicaid. Mm-hmm. It's an entitlement, and the states are only putting up 25 cents on the dollar, but that's what has all the states in lurch. Look, I think it's a terrible precedent that the government can tell us what we can and what we have to purchase. That's the terrible precedent here. Hey, the ruling has gone down, so looking forward, we need to be looking at repealing this legislation. We need to be looking at amending it as good as possible. I really think that this is the torpedo in the sinking ship when it comes to money and the amount of money that this is going to cost. I think Medicare is the big 800-pound gorilla in the closet. I think Medicare is going to get dwarfed by this health care plan, and that we're going to all go down on a sinking ship together unless we really get our spending under control and really take the bull by the horns and live within our means.
So to that point, I think we're talking about, you know, we've added another entitlement. We're talking about trying to wean people off 50 years worth of entitlement programs in the old program itself of Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security. But we also have a massive number of what I would consider to be self-entitled baby boomers, or as I'm now calling them, baby robbers, becoming the voting bloc that is going to protect their entitlements. What is the realistic ability to actually put a stop to that? I mean, do you think we have any chance of saving the country from their vote?
Well, we do have a chance, but we've got to do it now. You know, I would like to point out, I'd like to point something out here. How many times have we taken our kids out to dinner, and at the end of that dinner, we said, hey, you know, want you to pick up the tab. I know I invited you out to dinner, but I want you to pick up the tab. Well, never. And that never happened when our parents took us out to dinner, that they said, hey, we expect you to pick up the tab even though you've eaten dinner. Well, you know what we're doing right now? We're doing with our kids and the generation before me. Basically, they're saying, look, we're going to retire and we're going to have health care and you're going to have to pay for it. Oh, and by the way, you will never be able to stop working. Never. You're never going to be able to retire. That's the situation that we have right now, and it is incredibly unfair. Incredibly unfair. It's a Ponzi scheme that has to be fixed, and it has to be fixed now.
Now, to that point about the younger generation, we also have a major problem with lack of investment. And I understand the need for austerity, but we've already had 35 years of lack of investment in bridges and roads and so on and so forth. So how do we, in the face of that austerity, give back the infrastructure that we've basically let fall apart?
Well, in my opinion, let's build roads, schools, bridges, highways, and hospitals in this country as opposed to half a world away. Let's just start with that. And I do believe that if we don't balance the federal budget, we're going to find ourselves in a monetary collapse. And a monetary collapse, very simply, is when the dollars that we have don't buy anything. That's a monetary collapse. It's when a can of Coke sells for $100, and you know what? It moves very quickly to get to 100, and from 100 it goes to, gee, you can't buy a Coke at any price, and they're not even on the shelves anymore. The shelves are barren because everybody's caught on to the fact that the dollars that they have aren't worth anything, so shelves have been laid bare. And all we have to do is look at the Soviet Union in the late 80s if we want to look to the most recent power, if you will, that has succumbed to a monetary collapse. That would be an ugly situation in this country. If we don't cut Medicare spending by 43%, the alternative is no health care at all. And that's what people have to understand. This is a sinking ship that if we don't all band together here and fix this, we are all going down together.
Let me do a quick follow-up on the monetary policy issue, and then I would like to move to the judge on a couple of the issues, including drug policy. You know, the Fed has been, of course, out of control in its printing of money and its quantitative easing on multiple levels and so on. And one, I am a big supporter of the idea of continuous auditing of the Fed and getting some control over their policies, but what is the alternative to what we saw in the 80s, where they pulled back and caused extreme recession as a result of pulling back the monetary, the amount of money that was being pumped into the system?
Well, you can argue that these are business cycles, and the one thing that we can control is spending. But we need to slash spending, and we need to slash it now. Talking about monetary policy. Look, if we abolish the Federal Reserve tomorrow, Treasury would still continue to print money, just like they did before there was a central bank. But the membership within the central bank, the Federal Reserve, it is an inside job, and it needs to be audited, and it needs to be transparent. And I'm afraid that they've inflated us into the current situation that we have, which has us right now at 0% interest rates, which basically say that if interest rates weren't at zero, we would be in the midst of this monetary collapse currently.
Now, to that point, if we start to see the advent of stagflation, which it seems to me we're potentially facing that now, if not, and we start to see inflation, the result of that is going to be increased interest rates, which increases our debt exponentially, does it not?
It does, and that's the bond market collapse that is looming out there. Currently, though, nobody wants to say anything about it because we've got this artificial, the world currencies are flocking to U.S. treasuries, and it's an artificial phenomenon. But at some point in the future, there will be a bond market collapse, which will be a collapse in bond prices and a spike in yield because people are not going to want to be investing at 0%.
So, you know, part of the libertarian ideal is personal freedoms, and we also know that the drug war at some level has been pretty destructive. You guys have both been advocates of legalization of certain drugs. I'd like you to give me an idea of what your platform is on drug legalization, if you could, Judge.
Well, first of all, you can see why I'm so enchanted with this governor. I've told him many times that he is the most qualified person to be president of the United States that I know of. And when he asked me to be his running mate, I said I wouldn't do this for very many people I can think of, but I certainly, Governor, would for you. With regard to how I ever knew Governor Johnson existed, I was involved with drug policy reform starting in 1992. And pretty much everybody in the country knew each other who was involved in this on a big-time basis. And all of a sudden, we saw the headlines all together, didn't see it coming, that this Governor Gary Johnson from New Mexico has conducted an audit, his own audit of his own state, and then had the fortitude, the courage to stand up and say, this isn't working, we have to get our heads together and we have to change it. Whoa, you know. He didn't have any constituents to do that, but he sees what's wrong and he stands up and talks about it. And now he's doing the same thing with our economy. This isn't just the sky is falling, the sky is falling, and we need to come to grips with it. We, in the drug policy reform business, absolutely know that eventually we're going to be successful, Kevin, and in fact yesterday, the city of Chicago decriminalized marijuana. It's the country of Uruguay is now, the government itself is selling marijuana. Other countries, Mexico, thankfully, is starting to talk in this direction. So we have to regulate and control marijuana. By the way, pretty much every city is bankrupt, or they certainly are hurting for money. It's the largest cash crop in the state of California and probably the country. By the way, number 2 is grapes, if you care, in California. So it's out there. People are using it. Let's regulate it, control it, and tax it, and along the way, make it less available for our children. Well, it's going to happen.
So let's take a stretch then. I'm not much of an argument on the marijuana side, but what are we talking about on some of the more harder drugs? Are we proposing the legalization of other drugs?
You're talking to me or to the governor?
I believe, first of all, the only drug that I am advocating legalizing is marijuana. Okay. But Kevin, I think when we legalize marijuana, and by the way, we are at a tipping point on this issue. I think Colorado, it's on the ballot in Colorado this fall to regulate marijuana like alcohol. I think it has a good chance of passing. I think that would be the first of 50 dominoes to fall when it comes to drug policy. But if we will start with marijuana, legalize marijuana, and tomorrow wake up and recognize that law enforcement is actually going out and enforcing real crime, that the courts aren't as crowded as they have been, and that from a prison standpoint, we might actually be able to release a few of the 2.3 million people that we have behind bars. When we see that the country is actually a better place as a result of legalizing marijuana, in my opinion, we take giant steps forward toward rational drug policy regarding all the other drugs, which starts with looking at the drug problem first as a health issue rather than a criminal justice issue. Recognizing that 90% of the drug problem is prohibition related, not use related, and that is not to discount the problems with use and abuse, but that should be the focus. Recognition that prohibition drugs are methamphetamine and crack cocaine, neither of which would exist but for prohibition. Cheaper, easier to make, harder high, worse consequences for the user. Similar to the prohibition of alcohol, when this country was a beer drinking nation until prohibition arrived, at which time hard liquor came on the scene, which was cheaper, harder high, faster, quicker.
Easier to transport. Yep.
All the above.
Yep. Okay, so I'd like to move on to the foreign policy, because I know that one of the big platforms for you has been extraction of U.S. military from many of the bases around the world. But I also want to get specifically into what I see is, I wouldn't call it necessarily hypocritical, but a little bit confusing to me, and that is the support of going after the Joseph Kony individual in Africa, but yet don't seem to be taking a position on Iran. So can you kind of straighten that out for me, if you would?
Well, as I see the Joseph Kony situation, I don't think any of us want to stand by and watch a Holocaust go down. So in terms of Joseph Kony, it is my understanding that this terrorist group has been the worst terrorist group on the planet for the last 20 years. They're not specific to one country. They're marauding 3 African countries. The 3 African countries asked us to intervene. I think I would have signed a letter of marque and reprisal as opposed to using the U.S. military. I realize that they are there in an advisory role, but this was passed by Congress. Obama signed the legislation. If I would have signed the legislation, and I believe I would have, I would have asked for a volunteer force to go in to deal with this. And like I say, I view this in the context of, do we really want to stand by and watch a massacre go down and arguably this is a group responsible for tens of thousands of deaths, rapes, mutilations over the last over the time that they've been doing this. I think there's a big distinction here between our military interventions and this kind of situation. I do not want to use our military to intervene. Our military should only be used in cases of defense, and we've been anything but defense. It's been offense. It's been about a foreign policy riddled with unintended consequence. We take out Iraq. That was Iran's only concern, was Iraq, and what's Saddam Hussein going to do to us today? Right. We take them out. There's the unintended consequence of, and by the way, I do not believe that Iran poses a military threat. We should be vigilant to what may turn out to be a military threat, but there is not one today. And let's recognize Libya. Let's just look at Libya. We oust Gaddafi. We oust his personal military, and his personal military flees to Mali, where they have now deposed the democracy that existed in Mali. So we're down one democracy as a result of the unintended consequences. And then in Libya itself, are we not going to have another authoritarian dictatorship take over from Gaddafi? And is that going to be better or worse? Well, based on Egypt and
the Muslim Brotherhood, I would agree.
Well, the Muslim Brotherhood and the fact that the military is now taking over in lieu of democratic elections that they're now basically saying didn't take place, and we're not going to honor that.
Right, right.
So Mubarak, we displaced Mubarak. Who's going to take over? It looks like another authoritarian dictatorship, which I'm willing to go out on a limb here and say 20 years from now, it's not going to be any better than what it was before.
So back to the judge, I wanted to get him, you know, you and I have actually interviewed before, and you had some pretty strong ideas about court reform and some other concepts that I think are important from a national perspective, and I'd like you to touch upon those if you could.
Well, first of all, I'm proud of our court system, and basically I think our civil justice system works pretty well. It's overdone. I would bring in a system in the federal courts, because that's where we are, and the states can do as they wish, but to bring in a system in which in any civil case, the judge would have the discretion of awarding attorney's fees for the prevailing party. I don't want that to happen in every case like the English model, because it would be so ruinous to try to sue General Motors. If you were to lose, you'd have to declare bankruptcy. You just couldn't do it. You'd have a chilling effect. But if you knew that a judge would have the discretion in the event that you brought a case that you should not have brought, or pursued it after you eventually saw that, I think that would make a big difference.
So let me ask you on a more macro level too, in the way of the terrorist rights. I've noticed that the Libertarian stance, and I believe the actual campaign stance on the rights of those that are accused to have court proceedings. I'd like to hear your stance on that if you would.
Oh yes, I'm sure that the governor, he can speak for himself, but not in my watch. Anytime someone is detained in the United States of America or by our people, they're going to have charges brought against them, and they're going to have a trial. And it can be a military trial, a civilian trial, but I am not going, and under the National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA, which I would repeal, and I'm sure the governor feels the same way, a citizen of the United States could be detained. In fact, a citizen of the United States actually could be transported to a different country. Guess what's going to happen when that occurs?
Literally.
Disappears, tortured, whatever. That is not what the United States of America stands for, and that is not what will happen in a Johnson Gray administration. We are firm about that.
So I'd like to hear a little bit about the media and why it is that someone with your impeccable background as a governor, I mean, you clearly were one of the top 4 most successful governors when it came to budgetary management. You have an impeccable history. No one argues that you were successful, and yet the media seems to be locking you out of this discourse. What do you think that's about, Governor?
Kevin, I can only guess, but CNN was the one that cast all of this in stone. And basically, they excluded me from what was going to be the second debate on the basis of not being at 2% in A, B, and C polls. Kevin, I wasn't in A, B, C poll. So how do you get into debate if you're not in the poll? And then about 10 months ago, CNN included me in their first bi-weekly poll. And in that bi-weekly poll, I was at 2%, which tied me with Kane, put me ahead of Santorum, put me ahead of Huntsman. They had a debate coming up in a couple of weeks. We thought, well, this is the end of these problems. Actually, they took my name off of their polls from that day forward, never to reappear, with no explanation whatsoever. So this is manipulation of the process in a way that goes completely unnoticed by everybody. JessieVentura, unbeknownst to both myself and the judge, has come out and strongly endorsed our candidacies. Gary Johnson, Jim Gray, these are the guys you need to be voting for. He said that on CNN. He's doing that nationally. CNN had live coverage of that, and then they took that to the web coverage and deleted that 20 seconds of endorsement for us. So this is manipulation of the process in a way that goes completely unnoticed. Now, unlike 2% or 1%, which I think you can effectively sweep under the rug, right now we're polling at anywhere between 6% and 15% if we're in the polls. I don't think you can sweep that under the rug, and as it becomes known, or as it becomes more readily known that there are going to only be 3 parties on the ballot in all 50 states, and the candidates behind them, Democrats, Republicans, Libertarians, that Jim Gray and Gary Johnson are on the ballot in all 50 states, something that only 3 campaigns are going to lay claim to, be able to lay claim to. I think that's going to add if you will, who are these guys? Who are these guys? What are these guys saying? And I also think that Ron Paul's candidacy coming to an end, that there would be a lot of support from his supporters, given that what we're saying is really exactly what Ron Paul has been saying, and that we are a representative of the largest growing segment in American politics today.
Hi, I'm Sandra Hutchins. I'm the Sheriff Coroner of Orange County, and you're watching Facets Television.
Hello, my name is Judge Jim Gray. I'm retired from the Orange County Superior Court, and you are watching Facets Television.
I'd like to ask the judge, you know, Judge, like I said, we've interviewed before, and I'd like to know what caused you to put your name in the hat as the Vice President. It's not an easy decision.
I didn't put my name in the hat. This man put it in for me.
Well, there you go.
He contacted me, our campaign.
So what made you accept such a crazy decision?
No, it's not a crazy decision. As I said earlier, he is the only person I can think of that I would have done this with. He is the most qualified person to be President of the United States because he will do the right thing for the right reason. Yeah. And I'm proud to say, as a judge for 25 years, I was able to do that as best I could, and I'm too old to change. I'm going to do the same thing. And, by the way, the strongest, or one of the strongest abilities we have is that we're not Republicans and we're not Democrats. So we will have people in our administration who are from all parties, Libertarians, right, Republicans, Democrats, whatever, because of merit. And then, by the way, we will embrace good ideas and we'll give credit to where credit is due without caring about politics. And if we have, for example, some Republicans highly placed in the administration and we have something that the Republican Congress is trying to squelch, we'll have those people say, come on, guys, get with this. This is a good idea. Same thing for the Democrats. So we will have a consensus. We will work with people. Governor Johnson was very successful as a Republican governor working with the Democratic Congress, legislature in New Mexico. Yep. We will work with people as opposed to the politics of the partisanship now, to the degree that we will be able to get these things done where others can.
And I want to thank both of you guys for being on. I got to click off here to get set up for a town hall in just a few minutes. So thank you very much, and I'm going to bug out.
Thank you so much for taking the time to come see us, Governor.
All right, great seeing you all. Thanks.
See you soon, Governor. Go get them.
All right.
One of the things we wanted to talk about here was, you know, how do you deal with intelligent people that don't fit into either party? And I know that the Libertarians are kind of seen as a somewhat extreme wing of the independents. So
no,
how do you straighten that out for me, if you
Okay, and
would?
I'm glad you asked, because Libertarians are classic conservatives. We really do want to decrease the size of government and the expense of government. We're classic liberals as well. We really do want to maintain our civil liberties, get the government out of your bedroom, and maintain the soul of the United States, which is our freedoms and our liberties. So I can tell you that pretty much we are in the mainstream. Governor Johnson and I are the only candidates that are in the mainstream, because like he said, we are financially responsible, and I don't think Mr. Obama can get close to saying that. And we are socially tolerant, and I don't think Mr. Romney can get close to saying that. But the people are right out there with us. So they will gravitate to us, Kevin, as soon as we show them that we're viable. Now, what does that mean? Honestly, our campaign strategy is, and you heard it here first, we are going to be polling at 15% or more by the end of September. So we have still several months to do that. What difference does it make? By regulation, we will be a part of the presidential debates if we're polling at 15% in 4 different polls around the country. And if we're in the presidential debates, and by the way, there's one vice presidential debate, and I can't wait to debate against Mr. Biden. But when that happens, all the rules will change. People will see that they can vote for someone instead of voting against Obama or against Romney, and at least 20% of the Obama voters are voting against Romney and 20% of the Romney voters are just voting against Obama. They will come to us happily. I received numbers of emails from Democrats, Republicans, or otherwise saying, Judge Gray, thankfully now I don't have to choose between Obama and Romney. I can vote for you. So we're going to win this if we're in the debates.
So to that point, how do we or you as a group get more messaging out? Because whether I support you or not at this point as a candidate, I think the idea that you are not getting a fair shot is truly pathetic. Meaning that you and the governor are not getting an open forum. You clearly, I saw the polls, 12% in some areas, 9%, 7%. I mean, these are truly respectable numbers, no matter how you look at it. So how is it that we as a group can say, wait a minute, this needs to be a fair fight, and you shouldn't have to have $1 billion
and yes, hundreds of millions of dollars to be seen. And by the way, and we tell people in our ads that when you get another flyer, glitzy ad in the newspaper from the Republicans or Democrats, understand a lot of wealthy people paid for that, and they're going to expect payback after the election. The Libertarians are not going to have this problem.
Including casino owners.
But, well, there are lots of people. So this is what we're looking for. Your vote is your own, Kevin. But if the pollster calls you on the phone, first of all, don't hang up. Secondly, say, I'm going to vote for Governor Johnson. That will, in fairness, get us into the polls, and then listen, give us a break, and listen to what we say, listen to what they say, and we'll get our 15%. Just if our viewers now take it personally and get the word out, they can go to GaryJohnson2012.com, see our information, and send the information to your email world, your friends, your acquaintances, saying, give them a listen. And wouldn't the debates be much more interesting if Governor Johnson were in those 3 presidential debates and Judge Jim Gray were in that 1 vice presidential debate? If only to make it more interesting. And we will force Mr. Obama and Mr. Romney to debate, to discuss issues they do not want to discuss. That will occur if we're in these debates.
And they'll certainly make it a more honest conversation. I'm absolutely confident of that.
Absolutely. I had one condition when Governor Johnson asked me to be his running mate, and that was, Governor, we're going to run to win. I'm not in there for moral victories or to look good or have something occur good in 2 years. We're going to run to win. And I'm not naive. I know the odds are against us, but the odds are definitely there. We're only one of 3 campaigns that will be on the ballot in all 50 states. We have a really good chance of winning if we're in those debates. If we don't, we're going to be in trouble.
So we only have a couple of minutes left, and I wanted to deal with the reality that Obamacare is kind of with us to stay for the moment. And we have the Republican House repealing the bill, but what does that mean in effect? The Senate isn't going to allow it to happen. So what I see is, and I'm not an attorney, and I certainly have never been a judge, so what I saw this morning was, with the Medicare issue being what it is, effectively they aren't going to be able to maintain the lower end of this whole bill. Is that true? I mean, is that the way, did I read it the way I think I read it?
Yes, I think you did. Kevin, you're going to be surprised at my response.
Okay.
Mr. Obama is going to be in big political trouble because the Supreme Court upheld the Obamacare rules. Because the people are going to start to see that it simply was poorly thought out and hideously expensive, unworkably expensive. And so Obama is going to take a lot of political heat for that. He would have been much better off had the Supreme Court torpedoed it, and then he can say, well, folks, I tried, and it's those big bad members of the Supreme Court. But a lot of bad things are going to be visited upon him, and rightfully so. It was a terrible idea. It is going to ruin our healthcare system. And if you look at it, I'm older than you are. But when I was growing up in the 50s and 60s, it was not even a topic of conversation that we couldn't find reasonable health care for reasonable prices. Nobody was saying we're closing emergency rooms. It was a good system until, with LBJ Johnson, he started messing up with our system and got the government more and more involved. And now the government's almost completely involved, certainly with the Obamacare situation, and it's making it a tragedy. If we get the government out of it, and use the government as the last resort instead of the first resort, we will reclaim excellence in our healthcare system.
So one question I didn't get to ask the governor while he was still here was the stance on immigration. I understand that he's looking for, or at least the libertarian idea in general, is that the market will feed or remove the demand for immigration. My concern is that as long as you have a social welfare system that invites them to come along,
that's right,
you're never going to be able to have the market managing because they won't self-deport. So how do you deal with that? Do you remove all the social welfare programs?
That's not going to happen.
Right.
It should to some degree, but as long as you have a welfare state, you're going to need to have some immigration quotas. The problem is that neither the Republicans nor the Democrats want to fix this system.
Right.
If they'd wanted to, it's fairly easy to do, but they don't, because a lot of wealthy Republicans like the cheap labor, and a lot of wealthy Republicans, powerful Democrats, I mean, want all these people coming into the country eventually to vote for Democrats. So they give lip service to it, just like Mr. Obama recently. Had he wanted to do something about it, he's been in office for 3+ years. He could have done something already, but just pontificating out of desperation for political reasons, what you do is you issue work visas to people in Mexico or Canada or wherever fairly liberally. And then after a background check, you make sure that you're not bringing in people that are unsavory, and then they can work here. You punish employers that hire anybody that does not have that permit or isn't a citizen or green card, etc. And then the situation starts to go away. You also allow people to bring their families in if they can show they can support their families. But then you start getting control. They come across the border, they show their work visa, and they don't have to get a coyote, and it isn't expensive, and it's not dangerous, and those problems start going away. They get a Social Security card, so they start paying their taxes, and they get a driver's license, so these problems become normalized. It's not a way toward citizenship, although we should clean up those systems too. People have been waiting for decades, and that's just not right.
So how do you deal with the issue that, for example, I think the unemployment rate on the 16 to 25 or 27-year-olds is 25 or 27%.
You know, you heard the governor talk about the institutional change of abolishing the income tax. That is going to bring manufacturing and good-paying jobs back to the United States of America. By the way, I also saw in USA Today, it was an awful headline on the front page saying that job growth has come back because states and school districts are hiring more people. What? More government employees are being hired? That's really counterproductive. Right. We don't have the money to spend for that. We need private industry to do that. And the problem with this recovery is not only, we are borrowing 43 cents for every dollar the government spends, which is simply untenable. But so you have a budget that actually keeps spending within limits, but you also create these jobs. And by doing that, that's where you make progress. The government itself is standing in the way, Kevin, of our recovery today, because the banks, and I had a manager of a local branch bank talk to me and say, she has 30% of her employees that do nothing but attempt to comply with government regulations. That's disgusting. Yeah. They don't want your money because they can't loan it out. What we need to do, if you were to come to a bank with a good business plan, you need to get a loan, and then you start hiring 5, 10, 15 people. Today that can't happen because the government regulators are keeping those loans from occurring. So we're working against ourselves.
Right.
The government is the problem. We will hold people accountable. I was a former federal prosecutor. I believe in accountability. In fact, I was a head of a unit in the United States Attorney's Office in Los Angeles to prosecute frauds against the government, FHA, VA, etc. Most of the people I prosecuted were vice presidents of banks, for heaven's sake. I believe in responsibility at all levels, but let's have reasonable regulations and not over-regulate because it's stifling us. It's the government that got us into this mess. It's the government that's perpetuating it, and it's Governor Gary Johnson and Judge Jim Gray that's going to help us get out of it.
On that note, I think we're out of time, so what I'd like you to do is look at the camera and tell the folks how they can get a hold of your campaign.
Indeed. Go to GaryJohnson2012.com. You can donate there, and yes, we are soliciting your donations. Invest in your future. Invest in the future of your children, and also contact me. It's Jim P. Gray at sbcglobal.net. If you want Jim P. Gray, Gray is G-R-A-Y, that's my email address, and I'm getting a lot of emails, but I'll do my best to respond to you. Pass along information. Take it personally. Vote as if your future and that of your children to rely upon it, because they do. Vote for someone. You'll really regret it within the next 4 years if you don't, and you'll be overjoyed if you do. Gary Johnson, Judge Jim Gray, we're going to get this job done. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Judge.
Good luck to us all.
Time to come in.
It's an exciting time.
Closing on this camera.
My name is Kevin McDonald, and you've been watching Facets Television.